හරිම සුමුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9 this Thursday the 30th of November 2023. Lenders' assurance. The IMF welcomes Sri Lanka's agreement with the Official Creditor Committee, paving the way for the completion of the first review. Parliament debates. Finance State Minister expresses confidence in coming out of bankruptcy in the near future. Opposition accuses the government of economic destruction.
විශ්වාස කරනවා අපිට දෙසැම්බර් මාසෙ වෙද්දී මේ බංකොලොත්භාවයෙන් නිවත් වෙන්නත් ඒ වගේම දෙවෙනි වාරිකය ලබා ගැනීමටත් හැකියාව ලැබෙයි.
මේ ජාත්‍යන්තරේ හිඟා ගන්න සිද්ධ වුණේ ඕගොල්ලෝ රට බංකොලොත් කරපු නිසා. ඉතින් පැහැදිලිව රට මේ විනාශ මුඛය කරා ගෙනාවේ කවුද කියන එක පෙර පාසල් දරුවන් උනත් දන්නවා.
Understanding taxes. Tax expert urges companies to self-evaluate as several companies are said to be removed from VAT exemptions. Need to be decisive. Sri Lanka needs to take more critical decisions to attract more investors following the debt restructuring process, highlights former IMF resident representative in Sri Lanka.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
This is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to AdaDerana First at 9. I'm AdaDerana joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. Now in your top story tonight, the International Monetary Fund welcomed the agreement in principle between the Sri Lankan authorities and the Official Creditor Committee on a debt treatment consistent with the objectives of the IMF-supported program. According to the IMF Senior Mission Chief for Sri Lanka, Peter Brewer, these understandings pave the way for the IMF Executive Board to consider completion of the first review of Sri Lanka's 4-year extended fund facility arrangement, and added that they look forward to the Executive Board taking this review up by mid-December and the continuation of their productive collaboration with Sri Lanka in the period ahead. This development came 1.5 months after China agreed in principle to restructure $4.2 billion of debt. Yesterday, the Official Creditor Committee announced that they agreed on the main parameters of a debt treatment with Sri Lanka, consistent with those of Sri Lanka's extended fund facility arrangement with the IMF. In a statement, the Paris Club said that this agreement would allow the IMF staff to present the first review of Sri Lanka's EFF arrangement to the IMF Executive Board and pave the way for approval of the second disbursement under the arrangement. According to the Finance Ministry, the agreement in principle covers approximately $5.9 billion of outstanding public debt and consists of a mix of long-term maturity extensions and reduction in interest rates. The Paris Club said the Official Creditor Committee stands ready and awaits for the formalizing of the agreement in the coming weeks in a memorandum of understanding with Sri Lankan authorities. Following this development, State Minister of Finance Shehan Semasinghe stated the Official Creditor Committee's agreement now paves the way for the IMF board to consider the first review of Sri Lanka's EFF program and unlock the next tranche of IMF funding expected in December, which in turn would enable the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank to provide further financing. Meanwhile, against this backdrop, the International Monetary Fund welcomed the agreement in principle between the Sri Lankan authorities and the official creditors represented by the Official Creditor Committee on debt treatment, consistent with the objectives of the IMF-supported program. In a statement, IMF Senior Mission Chief for Sri Lanka said this agreement follows the earlier announcement of an agreement in principle between the Export-Import Bank of China and Sri Lanka. He stated that these understandings pave the way for the IMF Executive Board to consider completion of the first review of Sri Lanka's 4-year extended fund facility arrangement, and added that they look forward to the Executive Board taking up this review by mid-December and the continuation of their productive collaboration with Sri Lanka in the period ahead. Meanwhile, in Parliament today, State Minister of Finance Shehan Semasinghe expressed confidence in Sri Lanka making its way out of bankruptcy in the next few months with the unlocking of IMF's second tranche for Sri Lanka. Even though the opposition welcomed the agreement with the Official Creditor Committee, they accused the present government for leading the country towards economic crisis.
ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ නිල ණයහිමියන්ගේ කමිටුව ඊයේ තීන්දුව කරා අපි විසින් මේ වෙනතෙක් සාකච්ඡා කරපු ආකාරයට අපිට මේ ණය ප්‍රතිහුවගතකරණය සඳහා අවශ්‍ය මූලික එකඟතාවය පළ කරන්න. ඒ අනුව අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා ජාත්‍යන්තර මූල්‍ය අරමුදල අපිට දෙවනි වාරිකය නිදහස් කිරීම සඳහා උන්ගේ විධායක මණ්ඩලය ඒ අවශ්‍ය තීන්දුව අපිට ලබා දීලා ආර්ථිකය වර්ධනය සඳහා ලබන වර්ෂය තුල ගමන් කරන්න හැකියාව ලැබේවි කියලා. විශ්වාස කරනවා අපිට දෙසැම්බර් මාසෙ වෙද්දී මේ බංකොලොත්භාවයෙන් ඉවත් වෙන්නත් ඒ වගේම දෙවනි වාරිකය ලබා ගැනීමටත් හැකියාව ලැබෙයි.
ප්‍රතිවේගත කරන ගැන ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම අපි සතුටු වෙනවා. හැබැයි මේ ජාත්‍යන්තරේ හිඟා ගන්න සිද්ධ වුණේ ඕගොල්ලෝ නඩ භාග්‍යවලට කරපු නිසා.
මම දැන් මාස ගණනක් තිස්සේ ඔය කතාව කරනවා කිසි විසඳුමක් නැහැ ඒකට. මේ ඒතුමා තමයි විසඳුමක්
නැද්ද හිඟා ගන්න.
බොහොම ස්තුතියි.
IMF එකට යන්න එපයි කියලා IMF එකෙන් දුන්නු ඩොලර් මිලියන 100ක් එපයි කියලා කිව්වේ අපි නෙවෙයි 2020. මේ ආණ්ඩුව. ඉතින් පැහැදිලිව රට මේ විනාශ මුඛය කරා ගෙනාවේ කවුද කියන එක පෙර පාසල් දරුවන් උනත් දන්නවා.
මම මාස 4කට පෙර මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේදීත් මං එළියේදීත් පැහැදිලිව කිව්වා මේ විදිහට මේ වැඩපිළිවෙල ගියොත් අවසානයේදී මේක අවසන් වෙන්නේ මහා ඛේද වාචකයෙන්. මං ඔය ලේකම්වරයාට කතා කරලා කිව්වා මාස 2කට ඉස්සෙල්ලා. චන්ද්‍රගුප්ත ඔයා මේකට අත ගහලා මේක යන්න එපා මේක භයානක වැඩක්. මේ ඖෂධත් එක්ක සෙල්ලම් කරන්න යන්න එපා. ඕවට අත ගහන්න යන්න එපා. ඒක දෙන්නේ එතන ඉන්න වෛද්‍යවරුන්ට ඒක තීන්දුව කරගන්න. ඕක අත ගහන්න එපා. අන්තිමට නැත්තම් ඔයා යන්නේ ඔයා හිරේ ගිහිලා යන්න. අද එතුමා හිරේ යන්න ඉස්සෙල්ලා අද රෝහල් ගත වෙලා තිනවා. බලන්න මේකේ අන්තිමට ගිහිල්ලා මේ හොර ඖෂධ මේක අන්තිමට ආව ඉමුනෝග්ලෝබින් වර්ගයේ එකක්.
තවතිච්ච ආර්ථික අර්බුදය හමුවේ විවිධ ගැටලු හේතු වෙනුත් අපිට සාම්ප්‍රදායික සැපයුම් කරුවන්ගෙන් බැහැර වෙලා විවිධ ආයතනවල උදව් ගන්න සිදු වුණා. විවිධ ආකාර ප්‍රදාන ලබා ගන්න සිදු වුණා. තත්ත්වය ඉදිරි මාස කිහිපය තුලදී යථාවත් කර ගැනීමට හැකි වෙයි කියන අපි විශ්වාසය අපිට තිබෙනවා. ඒ යටතේදී හදිසි අවස්ථාවේදී භාවිතා කළ හදිසි මිලදී ගැනීම කියන ක්‍රමවේදය අපි සම්පූර්ණ නවත්වලා තිබෙනවා. ලියාපදිංචි නොවන ඖෂධ සියල්ල වෙනුවෙන්ම waiver of registration නිකුත් කිරීමේදී ඒ ලෝක සෞඛ්‍ය සංවිධානය විසින් ලබා දීලා තියෙන නිර්දේශයන්ට අනුගතව එම waiver of registration එහෙම නැත්නම් නිදහස් කිරීම ලබා දෙන්න එක අපි පැහැදිලි උපදෙස් ඖෂධ නියාමන අධිකාරී සභාපතිතුමාටත් කාර්ය මණ්ඩලයට දන්වලා තිබෙනවා.
Now, the former IMF resident representative for Sri Lanka, Dr. Nadeemul Haq, said that the country must take critical decisions to attract more investments following the International Monetary Fund's program, as the debt restructuring and the extended fund facility are both temporary solutions to the country's economic crisis. Joining at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24 with Indivari Amuwatta, Dr. Nadeem said that similar to the situation in Pakistan, the country must take critical decisions in opening up for better economic growth. Also joining the program, Professor in Economics at the University of Colombo, SP Premaratna, said the heavy taxation imposed on personal and corporate sectors will affect the investments in the private sector, and that the government must allocate tax revenue in the short run to facilitate the prosperity of the private sector to move the economy forward.
What is your view of the achievements Sri Lanka has made so far and the challenges ahead for the country?
Look, I think we must recognize that this is only the beginning. Like Pakistan, Sri Lanka also needs to take some deep decisions. For a start thinking about our destiny, our future. I mean, I think the most important thing is IMF program is just a temporary salve. Basically, what's happening is that the economy is hemorrhaging and the IMF comes in and puts a band-aid on it. That's only the beginning. Now, if you really want to put yourself on a sustainable path, I think Sri Lanka really has to take a deep view. What we have in Pakistan is nobody's willing to invest because we've got a huge regulatory machine that stops people from investing. And this business about taxation, which IMF recommends always, I'm opposed to this. I don't think we should think so much about taxation at this stage. We should really think about investment. How do you get investment to get increase? And anything that you can do, including getting rid of all regulation, just tell people to invest. Tell people from overseas to come and invest. Tell Sri Lankans to invest. If they can make building, make building. If they can make pencils, make pencils. If they can make sharpeners, they can make sharpeners. Whatever they can, Sri Lankans can produce, they should produce. So there has to be a deep rethink in the government, which I'm sure, I don't know much about Sri Lanka, as I said, I'm far, but hasn't happened in my country, despite the deep crisis. And when we get a debt rescaling, we kind of tend to accept that we've got a gift. We don't think that it is a need to reform. How much is Sri Lanka reformed? How much Sri Lanka has really changed? Or is it just the same old IMF prescription and 5 years later we'll be back to the IMF?
For a long time, we were talking about the importance and the necessity to increase the tax net and improve or widen the tax net. But here, again, with the requirements of the IMF, we've gone to unprecedented levels. It's difficult for people to bear.
Now, if you look at in Sri Lanka, direct tax on average 27%, indirect tax on average average 15%. Inflation on average 45%. If you count that 77%, we pay whatever you earn. Let's say you earn 100 rupees, you pay 77 to the government different ways. If you take the top 36, 96, if you earn 100 rupees, 96 you pay to the government. So that is the situation. Now those who pay the tax only about 15-13%. Disposable income goes down, their savings goes down, become most probably close to zero. When the savings closer to zero, investment goes down. That is effect to the supply side also. That is the thing. So the argument is crowding out, because if this happened, the government sector get that money, invest. Because the government has to address the market failure, support the private sector, move along.
Now, the COP28 World Leaders Summit commenced in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, today, marking the 28th iteration of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Representing the Sri Lankan delegation at the conference, President Ranil Wickremesinghe is set to propose 3 key focal points: the launch of the Climate Justice Forum, the Tropical Belt Initiative, and the establishment of a climate change university. The COP28 conference is scheduled to be held up until the 12th of December to bring the world together at a critical moment for the global transformative climate action.
The COP28 World Leaders Summit, or the 28th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, is scheduled to be held from the 30th of November up until the 12th of December in the United Arab Emirates. The conference commenced this afternoon. According to the President's Media Division, President Ranil Wickremesinghe is spearheading Sri Lanka's delegation to the conference, which is set to tackle pressing climate change issues and to address critical decisions. The conference will garner the participation of world leaders, public-private representatives, environmentalists and scholars. The PMD said President Wickremesinghe envisions 3 key focal points: the launch of the Climate Justice Forum, the Tropical Belt Initiative, and the establishment of a climate change university. In a visionary move initiated by President Wickremesinghe, Sri Lanka is set to launch the Climate Justice Forum during the COP28 conference in Dubai. The President, accompanied by 3 ministers and 2 opposition MPs, along with 20 young participants passionate about environmental concerns, will engage in this pivotal conference in Dubai. The primary objective is to harness support and collaboration from countries in the tropical belt to influence policymaking decisions on a global scale. According to the PMD, Sri Lanka, recognizing the critical role it plays in the fight against climate change, seeks to actively engage with the international community to garner support for its groundbreaking initiatives. Among the key agendas to be presented and discussed during the COP28 conference are Sri Lanka's recently introduced roadmaps on green hydrogen and sustainable energy. The President's Media Division further added that the country is also seeking endorsement for an establishment of a climate change university, signaling its commitment to fostering education and research in sustainable practices. A noteworthy aspect of Sri Lanka's approach in recognizing the plight of approximately 136 countries within the tropical belt, which bear the brunt of the adverse impacts of climate change. By championing initiatives like the Climate Justice Forum, Sri Lanka seeks to unite nations facing similar challenges and collectively address the urgent need for climate action. Sri Lanka takes pride in submitting a substantial number of proposals to this year's conference, underlining the commitment to translate proposals into actionable initiatives on the ground, and for the first time will showcase its own platform, signaling the nation's commitment to global climate action.
Now, meanwhile, President Ranil Wickremesinghe appointed Senior DIG Deshabandhu Tennekon as the new Acting Inspector General of the Police for a period of 3 months. Accordingly, he arrived at the police headquarters this morning. Following religious proceedings, Tennekon assumed duties as the new Acting Inspector General of the Police. Meanwhile, President Wickremesinghe has also informed the Constitutional Council on the appointment of Senior DIG Deshabandhu Tennekon as the new Acting Inspector General of the Police. The position was handed over to Senior DIG Deshabandhu Tennekon following the retirement of the former Inspector General of the Police, C.D. Vikramaratne. Now, in other news, former Secretary to the Ministry of Health, Janaka Sri Chandragupta, recorded a statement today at the Criminal Investigation Department. Chandragupta arrived at the CID this morning following an order issued by the Malikakanda Magistrates Court to record his statement pertaining to the substandard vials of immunoglobulin. When the case was taken up for hearing yesterday, Deputy Solicitor General Lakmini Girihagama, via a call report of the NMRA, said the vaccines in question are not suitable to be administered to people or to be used for laboratory tests. During the case, it was also revealed that the supplier of immunoglobulin had also supplied another substandard medicine named rituximab and the former Health Secretary Janakashri Chandragupta had written 3 letters to the company urging them to settle their delayed payments. Addressing the media after recording a statement, the former Health Secretary said that they have acted with transparency and in accordance with the law in procuring medicine. Now, marking a new milestone in the history of radio in Sri Lanka, AdaDerana visual radio was introduced today. Accordingly, listeners of AdaDerana can now watch the radio broadcast live on their personal devices. AdaDerana managed to provide this experience for listeners for the first time in Sri Lanka.
AdaDerana, the #1 radio station in the country, which has constantly presented the latest to the listeners through innovative concepts, took the art of radio to a new dimension today through introduction of visual radio. Visual radio was introduced under the patronage of chairman of the Derana Media Network, entrepreneur Dilip Jayveera.
Visual radio Madiriya Sri Lankiya Janata Venuwen Janagata Karanna.
Accordingly, listeners from around the country now have the ability to watch the radio broadcast live from today onwards. This experience can be gained through the website www.fmderana.lk, the DFlix app, as well as YouTube.
සතුටුයි. මොකද මගේ සීනියක් මේක. හැමදාම අපි හැම වැඩේම පළවෙනියට කරපු නිසා සන්තෝෂ වෙනවා මේ විෂුවල් රේඩියෝ කියන concept එක ලංකාවට හඳුන්වා දෙන්නට FM දෙන්නට ලැබිච්ච අවස්ථාව ගැන. ඉතින් මම හිතනවා ශ්‍රී ලාංකිකයින් මේක අගය කරයි, විශේෂයෙන්ම ශ්‍රී ලාංකික තාරුණ්‍ය අගය කරයි.
Welcome back. Now, following the latest on inflation, the Department of Census and Statistics said today that the inflation as measured by the Colombo Consumer Price Index has increased to 3.4% in November from 1.5% in October. The increase comes as the central bank reduced policy rates by 100 basis points last week with the expectation of stimulating economic growth in the country. However, during last week's monetary policy review, CBSL officials said that with the increased tax rates, the inflation will be beyond the expected rate of 5% in 2024.
The Department of Census and Statistics today issued inflation figures for the month of November as recorded by the Colombo Consumer Price Index. Accordingly, the Colombo-based inflation rate increased to 3.4% in November from 1.5% in October. The year-on-year inflation in the food group increased to negative 3.4% during November, while the non-food group inflation increased to 6.8% from 4.9% in October. For the month of November, the contribution to inflation by food commodities on a year-on-year basis was negative 1.2%. The contribution of non-food items was 4.56%, which was mainly due to changes of value in categories of housing, water, gas and other fuels, with a contribution of 3.78%, and education, which reported a contribution of 0.5% to the inflation figure. Meanwhile, on the month-on-month analysis, the Department of Census and Statistics highlights that for the month of November 2023, the CCPI for all items was recorded at 193.4 index points, up 2 index points or 1.06% compared to October 2023. According to the Department of Census and Statistics, the upward trajectory of the month-on-month inflation figure as measured by the CCPI corresponds to a 1,865 rupee increase of the expenditure value in the market basket.
Now, in other business news, the Minister of Economy and Planning of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Faisal bin Al Ibrahim, has announced that the country's national carrier Saudia, formerly known as Saudi Arabian Airlines, would recommence flights to Sri Lanka very soon. According to a statement issued by the Sri Lankan Minister of Foreign Affairs announcing the matter, the Saudi minister also took into note that the resumption of flights to Sri Lanka will contribute to capturing a sizable market of affluent Saudi travellers to Sri Lanka. The minister, who was on an official visit to Sri Lanka from the 26th to the 27th of November 2023, met with Foreign Minister Ali Sabri, where both sides discussed the formulation of an economic roadmap between Saudi Arabia and Sri Lanka that would encompass cooperation in a wide range of sectors, including trade and investment, power and energy, tourism, cultural interaction, digital transformation, and employment opportunities, particularly in the construction sector. Now, the Colombo Stock Exchange closed in green today for the second consecutive session as the banks and capital goods sector was pushing the ASPI up, continuing to run on the news that creditor nations agreed in principle on debt restructuring treatments. The Colombo Stock Exchange all-share price index closed up 0.77% to settle at 10,593.9 points. John Keel's Holdings, Commercial Bank and Melster Corp were the top gainers on the index, up 2.82%, 1.63% and 1.66% respectively. Trading volume on the ASPI rose to 57.7 million shares from 36.4 million shares in the previous session. The ASPI, the S&P Sri Lanka 20, meanwhile rose by 1.08%, ending at 3,010.03. Market turnover rose to 1.9 billion from 735.6 million rupees in the previous session. The capital goods sector was the top contributor to the market turnover today, while the banking sector was the second highest contributor. Foreign investors were net buyers of floating stocks worth 377.6 million rupees, while domestic investors were net sellers purchasing shares worth 1.5 billion rupees. Now let's take a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. Now, according to tax experts, Sri Lankan companies must start assessing their ability to register for value-added tax, as several industries which were exempted from the value-added tax are expected to be subjected to the VAT in the coming year, according to the proposal set out in Budget 2024. Talking exclusively to AdaDerana English News tax expert Suleiman Nishtar also pointed out that all other companies not exempted will move from a VAT rate of 15% to 18% from the next year onwards.
So on the tax side of things, we have today being the 30th of November, a significant date for taxpayers and tax practitioners as well, because it's the last day to file your return for the year of assessment 22-23. I hope most of you have already filed your returns, and if you haven't, I think even the next few days, make sure you take time to do your duty by filing your tax returns and paying whatever is necessary. Those who need to file returns are basically anyone who has income that exceeds 100,000 a month from April 1st, 2022 to 31st March 2023. There is 2 periods that have to be attended to. That is, the first 9 months you have to have at least 250,000 a month, and in the last 3 months it should be 100,000 a month or above. In addition to that, this year a circular was issued, or gazette was issued by the Commissioner General, adding 14 different people into the tax net despite not having the income threshold. And that is several professionals, from chartered accountants to lawyers to those who own property, those who own vehicles, are all required now to file a return. So do your assessment and see whether you fall within. And if you do, make sure you file your returns, if not today, in the next few days at least. On the VAT side, a significant change that we saw in the budget and just prior to that was the removal of several exemptions from VAT, right? So several exemptions, like for example, mobile phones, laptops, IT services, software development, all of that was exempt from VAT. And now, most likely, if the law gets passed from January 1st, those are going to be liable to VAT. So those companies need to assess their ability to get into a VAT registered situation, understand the compliance process, and see what systems need to be changed within yourselves in terms of, even if it's a manual system or an IT system, what you need to do to be compliant with VAT is critical. So this month, December is a critical month for any company that's coming out of the exemption, and all other companies will move from 15% to 18% VAT on goods and services. So only a very few goods and services are going to be exempt from VAT. Everything else is going to move to 18%. So you need to take this month to assess your liability to VAT and need to be prepared for it.
Now, in other business news, Navalika Hospitals in a statement said that Dr. H.K. Jayantha Dharmadasa will continue as the chairman and the chief executive officer of the company. Meanwhile, BPPL Holdings PLC, an exporter of recycled plastic products and yarn, has been awarded Asia's Best Under a Billion by Forbes Asia for the year 2021. With that, let's take a look at the latest corporate sector developments during the day.
In a statement, Navaloka Hospitals said that Dr. H.K. Jayantha Dharmadasa will continue as the chairman and the chief executive officer of the firm due to the knowledge and expertise he has in relation to the operations of the company. Further, the company said the board of directors has already appointed Tilak Dizoisa as the senior independent director of the firm. Meanwhile, BPPL Holdings PLC, a leading brushware manufacturer and filament export manufacturing firm, said it was awarded the title of Asia's Best Under a Billion for the year 2021 by Forbes Asia. The award ceremony took place on the 21st of November in Manila in Philippines. Forbes Asia's Best Under a Billion award recognizes companies demonstrating long-term sustainable performance across a range of criteria from a pool of over 20,000 publicly traded companies in the Asia-Pacific region, with annual sales exceeding $10 million but below $1 billion. In other news, the Colombo Fort Land and Building PLC in a statement said that Amrit Rajaratnam has been appointed as the non-executive director of the board with effect from 29th of November 2023. Rajaratnam, who began his career at the law firm of Julius & Creasy, later joined Lanka Ceylon. He is also a director of Beruwala Resorts, Maravilla Resorts and Sigire Village Hotels.
And with that, we wrap up tonight's edition of AdaDerana First at 9. Stay in touch with us on www.adaderana.lk for the latest developments around the clock. Thank you. Have a great night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.